Good morning and welcome. I'm Rajesh Turakia, founder director of Frameboxx 2.0. Soon after the COVID lockdown, we at Frameboxx started our online activities of classes and industry-relevant seminars, webinars for both students and industry professionals. Frameboxx started the online webinars with some technical software-related subjects and went on to career counseling. After that, we started a series called Animate in India and brought some stalwarts of our industry to speak at these events. But today, I'm proud to say that we have a speaker like no other before him. Dr. Max Howard is a veteran, being a studio head at Disney and Warner Brothers, overseeing many cult animation films like Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, and many, many more. And he will be in conversation with Kirit Khurana, a well-known Indian animation and live-action film director, having directed 4 films, has 6 national awards and 14 international awards to his name. We bring this exclusive webinar in association with Climb Media, MESC, TASI, and Animation Express. So without wasting any more time, I will now share the screen with my dear friend and Frameboxx Governing Council member, Kirit Khurana.
Major luck.
Incredible, right? Absolutely fantastic. It's amazing to have Max Howard, who has created and ran animation studios for Walt Disney Company in London, Paris, Orlando, and Los Angeles, working on some of the Disney's most memorable films. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, and what have you. The president of Warner Brothers feature animation. He oversaw such hit movies as Iron Giant. I don't know how many people actually saw Iron Giant. It's a fantastic film. And of course, Brad Bird went on to make Incredibles as well. And Space Jam, of course, one of my favorites. And at DreamWorks, he was the executive co-producer for Spirit, fantastic film again, Stallion of the Cimarron. So the idea of having Max here was to actually speak to him that why did he make all these cult films and how did he actually make it, and what is the secret and the recipe behind it. And Max is, of course, there's other things about Max is he's worked with UNICEF to bring health and social messages to developing countries. And you know what, he also has an Indian connection, so we'll also come to that. And he's worked with the Caribbean and the South American people using UNICEF for the use of animation, underscoring the importance of media, underscoring the important role of this medium that can overcome ethnic and social prejudices. So, and I want to let you into a secret. So he is also a very big cricket buff, and he claims to know the answers. So we can ask him some really tough questions. I don't think he knows much, but we can ask him some questions. What do you say? So what we'll do is I will be looking at your questions as we go along, but most of your questions will be answered at the end of the session, which is about after we have spoken to Max. But if there is an interesting question, if there's some interesting comment, we'll put it up there, and we will keep it interactive as much as possible and make it as interesting as we can. So welcome everybody, and I'm happy to see more than 150, 200 people now. And thank you, Abhishek, for coming, Abhigyan, Wonder Girl, Srishti Banerjee, and it's great to have you all here. And now I'll hand it over to Max, presenting Max Howard. Ta-da! I don't have the music, and you can play it in your head. And you can welcome Max.
Well,
hey Max, how's it going?
It's going great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for both of you for those lovely acknowledgement. Good morning. It's introduction. Thank you. It's 7 o'clock in the morning here I'm in the UK.
Oh, yeah.
I'm isolating here from this terrible virus, but I'm well away from London or any of the big cities, so it's very nice. But it is very early in the morning. But I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, the lockdown has been a boon for us because people like you are not available otherwise, right? So we're happy to have the lockdown because we can talk to you.
Well, I'm making the most of it, and I think we're all getting to learn how to communicate using these types of systems, and I think it's fantastic. And I'm just thrilled to be here today. And I know you suggested this first of all to me, and I thank you for doing that. I want to say something. You know, the clips that you saw at the beginning, I'm not an animator, and I'm I bring people together. So there's not my personal work on any of those films, but I've had the pleasure of working with stunning and most amazing artists over so many years, and I'm just thrilled that I can put those little clips together and show them to you. You know, and it reminds me, and it always gives me a little, you know, you play those moments and such, you know, great memories of those films, but also all the time people know the films, you know, and some of them, you know, 25, 30 years ago. And it's something I learned from Disney, really, from my childhood, is that the Disney films that I loved as a child are still loved today. And it's been part of what I've been able to be part of, which is the idea that you've made one of these films and they go on entertaining people. And it's a unique part of our industry of these films that become timeless because they're moving art. It's quite unique. I'm just going to move my screen slightly. Okay.
All right. So Max, you talked about your childhood, and I want to get straight into your childhood. So what were your early childhood influences, and why is it that you gravitated towards animation? I mean, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Because I think we have a lot of we have a lot of inquisitive students here who would love to know what it takes to put a team together that makes those fascinating films. Yeah, and I think it's very important from that perspective purely.
Well, I'm glad the seminar is going to last 24 hours, so that'll give me time to explain everything. But hey, I'm British by birth. My country now is America, although I still return to Britain. I still retain my British passport, but I am an American citizen, and it's the journey through animation that took me to America. But my life started in the theatre. My dad was an actor. His mum was a performer, and so I come from a theatre family and grew up in the theatre world. And my first work, I've worked in the entertainment industry since the age of 8 years old because I was a child actor. And then as I graduated, I went to a child acting school. I made a lot of movies as a kid, big live action movies, always as a child in the background. I was never a big star, but it gave me a real insight. I got to work and see in action some of the world's greatest directors, Richard Attenborough, Anthony Mann, Jack Clayton, amazing directors. So, and then I moved into the theatre, became a theatre manager, actor, producer. I got to work with some of the great playwrights from, Noel Coward, Harold Pinter, John Osborne. I'm telling you all of this because it underpins my work in animation. And my work in animation came when I was in my 30s. I'd been managing and producing and directing in London in the British theatre scene. And a friend of mine, somebody I worked with in the theatre, had gone to work for Disney. And I'd managed a play in London, and we didn't get very good notices, and we closed after a few weeks, and I was out of work. And one day the phone rang, and it was somebody I'd worked with in the theatre, American, who'd now gone to work for Disney, and his name was Peter Schneider. And he'd been brought into Disney by Roy Disney to help revitalize the animation department. And they had a project that they wanted to do in London because of an animation director called Richard Williams. But the film's producers were Steven Spielberg, the director was Robert Zemeckis, and Peter wanted an executive in London who knew how to, if you're in Mumbai and, you know how to get things done in Mumbai, you know who to call, and, you need a visa, you need to get something done. And so that was my job, and my entry into Roger Rabbit was to put this studio together and manage this team. I knew nothing about animation other than being a fan like everybody else was. I thought it was great, didn't know anything about it. But what I did know, and I come from a theater background, and theater, is almost can be described as a labor of love. Often it's not the most lucrative. When you're working, when audiences are buying tickets, you're working, and if they stop buying tickets, you have to find another job. And so I was thrilled when Disney was suggesting that, I'd be considered for this role, and it was going to be 18 months work. I thought, fantastic, I got this wonderful job and very well paid. And I then had to meet everybody, Richard Williams, and everyone had to approve me. And I remember, I remember being about 2 or 3 days into the job, and people were describing to me the animation process, which I found very complicated and very isolated. And interesting, I should use the word isolation because that's what we're all in. But the work of the animator is in isolation in the actual performance of their job, and so I thought that was really interesting. There didn't seem to be an interactive process in creating something. I'm used to working with actors. We rehearse, we put on the play. Absolutely. There's an energy. Absolutely. There's an energy that's created between the performers. So. And I remember saying to somebody, this sounds so complicated. They said, you just wait, wait till you meet the actual animators. Because I hadn't really met I met, all the senior people. And I met the animators and I went, oh, you're actors. And this is considered a cliche, right? A little bit of Ed Hook, the marvelous Ed Hooks and I had endless conversations about these. He's a dear friend. And and I love hearing Ed because he talks about what the animator should be thinking, because he needs to know what the character's thinking. And from that moment on, I took all the disciplines of animation, design, lighting, everything, and I was able to compare it to all the different disciplines in the theater or in film, but recognizing they happen in a different timeline, that it's a linear pipeline. So all the things of creating an energy, bringing artists together, creating all the things that one doesn't get in animation became so important in running a studio and bringing it together. Absolutely. But very quickly I realized that I had some great mentors. I had animators like Phil Nibelink. I mean, there were Roy Nesbitt, who was Richard Williams' right hand, did all the wonderful layouts for The Thief and the Cobbler. I mean, absolutely marvelous man. And of course, Richard and above all, I suppose, Don Hahn, who was the associate producer, who was the American animation expert, who's become a lifelong colleague and friend. And so, I picked it up very quickly. But honestly, it was an 18-month job. And at the end of 18 months, I was going back into the theater, saying, hey, I'd had a great experience. But of course, during the film, Disney were expanding in America. They hadn't made The Little Mermaid. They hadn't made any of the films that you mentioned, but they wanted to. And they needed to expand, and they needed to build a studio in Florida at Walt Disney World. And they needed somebody to run that studio. And suddenly They'd been working with me at arm's length. They'd been getting used to talking to me, you know, over phones and emails, or not emails, not emails. And so I got asked to go to America. But again, I went for 2 years. My daughter had just been born. I thought a couple of years with our family in America. We'd do a couple, you know, I'd set up this studio for Disney. I was going to do the first film there. In fact, I was going to do a lot of Roger Rabbit shorts, actually. And then I was going to go back to England in time for our daughter to go to school, you know, 2 or 3 years later. And of course I stayed, and I went on this fabulous journey. But the reason, you know, I want to talk to you about the theatre was that those theatrical roots, because I love animation, but it's a tool. It's not an end of. It is a fabulous method of telling stories. It's a great medium.
Fabulous.
Yeah, exactly.
Fabulous.
Exactly great.
So, Max, we have a lot of young students over here who have not heard many of the names because they're not initiated with the history. So let me just take them through it a little bit. So Richard Williams is one of the gurus of animation, and he's written this wonderful book called Animation Survival's Toolkit, right? And it's a book that is a Bible for every single classical animator. So even if you're a 3D animator or you're a 2D animator, you should have that book, and it's a fantastic book. And of course, one of the things that Max, correct me if I'm wrong, is that after the death of Disney made the film in 1967. The last film that he made, personally supervised, was Jungle Book. And after that, once he died, you know, animation went downhill. So 85, 86 is when Who Framed Roger Rabbit came in, and it was actually the revival of animation, because animation was something that was being considered to be going downhill, and perhaps not a medium that is going to be preferred anymore, because it was considered to be this thing. So Max, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. That's exactly what happened. And I think when you have great leaders, and I think these are things, you know, about leadership. When you have a great leader and a great innovator, a great visionary, what you tend to surround yourself with, or need to surround yourself with, is people who can carry out your vision. And Walt was brilliant at that. I mean, you know, extraordinary man. Absolutely. But when he died, of course, what I would call the lieutenants were now had to be the innovators. And they're to begin with, they were fulfilling the plans that Walt did have, opening Walt Disney World. You know, that was all done after in Florida, the big theme park. So there were plans that were undertaken because you know, that Walt had already said what he wanted. But after that, they were trying to think what Walt would have done. Yeah. And that's when the innovation went. And if you look at all the films, they're not badly crafted. They just lack a magic because people are guessing. And there's a very famous story in 1984 when Michael Eisner, who was one of the executives along with Jeffrey Katzenberg, was asking about the animation process, and was in a story meeting actually, and he was being shown storyboards. And he said to everybody, look, I'm a live action filmmaker. I work with scripts. You know, give me the script. I'll read it over the weekend, and I'm going to come back in on Monday, and we can talk some more about, I think the film was called Basil of Baker Street, or it had two different names, depending American name and international name. But it's a very nice film. But anyway, when Michael asked for the script, they said, we don't have a script. We don't use scripts in animation.
That sounds like Bollywood.
And Michael said, well, what do you mean you don't have scripts? And one of the people said, well, Walt Disney never used scripts. He told us the stories, and Michael Eisner famously said, Walt Disney is dead. And it was a wake-up call that we must build on his legacy, but we can't stay the same. Yeah. And so that was the first time scripts came in. Of course, to somebody who comes from the theatre like me, I too couldn't understand why there wasn't a script. And now, all these years later, when I work with independent filmmakers as a consultant, the first thing I say, let's get the script right. It's the least expensive place to do it. And I have certain techniques that I use for testing the script, but get it on a piece of paper first. It's a story, it's a script. And if you have a script, I can give it to the character designer, I can give it to the visual designers, and hopefully it will inspire them. So the artwork comes out of the words. And I think that's, as opposed to the artwork being created and then trying to find a story to fit the picture. And so that's been my mantra all these years.
So I think that's a very important lesson for all the young animators out there who want to do just more than animation. They want to make their own animation films. Is that first thing is focus on your story. Don't get into onto your systems or your laptops or your workstations and start animating and start designing characters and then figuring out the names of the characters, the backstories of the characters. Write the story first, get critiqued, get inputs, get feedback from people, from experienced people, and then once you're confident of it, you can go ahead and make your own short films or whatever you want to make. And is that the most important, like one of the things that I remember that one of the famous authors said, that the three most important elements in any film are story, story, and story. So we're going to discuss more on that as we move along with Max. And Max, my next question to you is, so what do you like about animation and why is it so important to you? I mean, I love the fact that you were an actor. So this is one of the things, many of the animators in India are a little inhibited. They are a little shy. They don't want to act all that much. So it's important that you get up from your chair, act the scene out, and then you can really bring your scene alive. That is so important. And I think one of the things that that Max is talking about is his background. The reason why he loves the animation is because of the fact that because he's intrinsically an actor himself at heart, and he loved the fact. So Max, I want to hear from you. What more do you like about animation? Why is it that you chose animation? Yeah,
I'm going to give you a little secret from the scripts, and then which I was something as you were talking, we were just finishing up the previous question. What I was amazed about, and it follows into what you were talking about, acting and standing up and doing something, is when we write a script and when we read a script, we're reading all the characters. It's not a novel. We're reading the dialogue. And so in our own minds, as we read the script, we're interpreting the dialogue. And I thought, wow, because it's a big skill to read a script. My father told me that if a script reads well, be careful, because it may be reading like a novel, because scripts are not designed to be read. They're designed to be seen and heard. So you have to interpret. So one of the techniques I used, and I think I was the first person to introduce it, it's now widely done. But on Iron Giant, I organized a table read. I employed some very good local Los Angeles actors. We rehearsed, and then we then heard. So I didn't read, I was listening to the dialogue. And, if an actor says a line in a particular, with an emphasis either, or an emotion, anger or fun, you could take the same line and interpret it different ways. But if I say a line to you, like, we have a dialogue exchange, if I use a passion or an emotion in that, it's going to make you say your line differently back to me. And so so that's the first thing I do is let's hear the script out loud. And I would advise anyone to do that. And if you have stories and you have a script, group of students gather around, each take a part and read it out loud. You will hear it differently than if you read it. It's so worthwhile to, and never not do that. Make sure the script can come alive. What I like about animation is what I'm left with, which is, I think it's the same for any movie, because it's your work, it's finished, and like your films, Tariq, that you've made, they're there. They're not going to change. They're not. Well, you might do a director's cut one day, I don't know, but essentially that's your work. My previous work has to the theatre, and I love the theatre because I love live audiences. I love the energy you get between the performer and the audience. And every night, every performance is different. But everything all my experiences in the theaters are in here. They're memories. That I can't go back. I can't see it, you know. But with animation, the films are there, and because I touched on it earlier, it's the timelessness of these films. You know, most people have seen most classic animated films, and not because our audience here today may have seen them because that's their interest. They want to come into our part of our industry, but people, kids, everybody. And when they watch the films, they don't think it's some old-fashioned film made 30, 40 years ago that their parents used to like, and well, my dad liked that, so I don't like it. It's the complete opposite. And then, because if you grow up with these films, when you have children and families of your own, you can share this unique experience with them. And that is what is completely and utterly unique to animation. Any live action film, any film with an actor in it, we are able to date it. We're able to put it in a time period, and it doesn't matter if it's a classical film. I mean, it could be a period film. You can still figure out when it was made. But I mean, it's mainly because you know the actors, and you know, oh, that was when he was young. You don't say, oh, that was when Mickey was young.
Absolutely. So I'm coming back to that one word that you talked about, timeless, right? How do you actually create films that stand the test of time, like something like a Lion King? Let's talk about Lion King, right? And how do you create something that is evergreen, that lasts forever, that your children can watch and you can watch, and therefore you have the same memories and the same experience? And that's so poignant, and that's so pertinent, you know, from a perspective. Yeah.
Well, I think it's because we're dealing, you know, in animation, the timeless nature of it. But they're often the first or early experiences for children. And so, if you think of the films that you saw as a child, whatever they were, there are experiences that stay with you. And so you immediately have that aspect to it, which is key, and that's what makes them timeless. As to them, and therefore they stand the test of time because you want to relive it. It's important when you're setting out on one of these films. Of course, you want it to become timeless, but what it must be first, it must work upon its release, and so the timelessness is a benefit, but it's not necessarily the goal of the filmmaker. The goal of the filmmaker is to make the very best film. Normally, most animated films will stand the test of time, but depending on the subject matter, you know, they might not. But equally, we must not preclude artists using animation to tell many, many stories. And one of the frustrations I think I see in animation is because we witness it as a child and we love it as a child. When we think we're a teenager, we decide that animation is for children, and we mustn't see it anymore. And there are examples of this, but animation is a wonderful medium. It's a wonderful way of telling stories. Unfortunately, it's limited to more children's entertainment, and of course, from a profitability point of view. Films for children, for families, are much more profitable than more adult films, grown-up films.
Absolutely.
And it's because of, you know, the secondary revenues, you know, all the merchandising, streaming. There's a, you know, with kids, you know, they watch the films over and over again, and there are a lot of ongoing benefits to an animated film. But I'm hoping over time we're going to see more and more films made for older audiences, because as I said at the beginning, it's a tool for telling stories. But I've always wanted to see a great scary movie, you know, really, you know, a scary movie in animation, because it would be fantastic. But that's not where the money is, and it's not where the work is. But I think one day we're going to see more and more films. I mean, there have been great films. You know, there's a film called Wolves with Bashir, which is about being a military in Israel, you know, in 1981, and I think it's a very interesting film.
Yeah, it's a very powerful film, very, very, very powerful.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember.
But Yeah, but it still has a limited audience, doesn't it? I mean,
that's the issue.
Yeah.
And that film was highly subsidized by the French government.
Right.
But Ari Folman was the director. It's a marvelous piece. It has a graphic novel sensibility to its art direction. So it's very important. But yes, you're absolutely right. You know, if we're talking about profitability, you know, a large problem. Of course, you aim for animation. But the right budget, the right film, and finding a niche audience. And I think because of all these new online platforms, you know, I think as we're seeing more and more documentaries made. I mean, documentary filmmakers 5-10 years ago, you know, there was no, you know, now there are so many documentaries because there's a place to put them and there's an audience, but it's a niche audience. But it can live online, whereas you can't get a theatrical release for a documentary. But it's found its pathway, and I think the same will happen in animation. You know, for using it as a documentary filmmaking tool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that brings me to my next question, which is, you know, putting a team together is a Herculean task. Identifying and training the artist, to everybody to fall in line to a script or to a vision that the director has, to a certain design that is there. How do you actually go about this this enormous task, and how do you get everybody? How do you actually put a team in place for such huge projects? How do you actually do that? And
it starts with the individual, and it reminds me of something I used to say to the students, the interns, who played such an important part in the growth of Disney, because I went to America to grow the studio with others. But when I started Disney, they were probably 200 or 300 people. When I left Disney, we were 2,000 people. You know, so that growth. But yeah, we really did. So, and part of my responsibilities at Disney was to run the program, and we recruited from the very best art schools across America. And the only one with an animation program was Cal Arts. The rest, in those days, there was nobody. There was Sheridan in Toronto, but no one else was teaching animation, because there was. Yes, okay. So there was no employment, you know, at those days. But you know, Ringling, the very good animation school, we used to recruit from Ringling. But when we went there wasn't an animation program. We were looking for great draftsmen. We were looking for great artists. And of course, I am talking 2D. But I used to say to the group of artists, because they used to come, these students would come and spend a semester with us. And you know, obviously, from our point of view, we were looking at their temperament, their quality of their work. But I said to them at the beginning of the program, I said, you need to look at this. This is a fantastic art form, but if you come to Disney, you come and you're going to be part of a team. And what you've been doing as an artist is working individually, really from your own.
Max is out. And we'll see if we can answer some questions right now. And hi Harish, Todor, everybody. And we're just waiting for Max to come in. The Lion King is the reason I'm into this. And thanks, Harish, for that comment. And it's great to have you here. And I think Max will be joining us shortly. We look at that. There was one question over here about software. So Amay Mehta talked about software, right? So software really doesn't matter. It's about your creativity in art. You can get all the tools you want. Sorry, Max, you're back online. Come on.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. My screen suddenly went dark.
Yeah.
I just see if I've got enough. I think I'm all right. Yes, well, I should say to the artists at Disney. So, you know, if you join us here and if you qualify, you are going to be part of a team. You're going to be fulfilling someone else's vision, a collective vision. We need you as an individual artist, but working collectively. And you need to think about whether you can do that, whether that's where your heart is. There's nothing more gratifying than sitting with a group of artists who've made one of these films at the premiere, you know, the crew screening. And if I stuck the film and say, okay, who worked on this frame, 20 or 30 people would stand up, you know, and say, I worked on this frame. You know, and I said, that's fantastic. But you need to, so I start from day one about talking about teamwork. And then as a manager, I have to recognize that I can't treat everyone the same and should not treat everyone the same. And I'm not talking, benefits of the job. I'm not talking about treating somebody better than others. I'm talking about, perhaps discipline, inspiration. There are some times when you need to put your arm around somebody and encourage them, help them, show them. And there are times when you need to sit somebody down and say, listen, you're not really working hard enough. Or your heart, whatever the problem is, you need to address it. But you must address the problem with the individual, not with the whole studio.
Yep.
And that's so recognizing the individual,
right?
But within a team.
So it's all about managing people and managing egos and managing making sure that you're fostering creativity within the studio as well.
Well, you just said something earlier, but we were talking about acting, and you saying that these animations you need to get up and perform and act out the work, and that's absolutely true. And people everyone's nervous of doing anything like that. But just think of the nervousness an artist has when they complete their scene and they need to show it to the director. That's
Absolutely.
The same thing. It's nerving. It's nervous, and I talk to actors about this. I will talk to an animator about this. There is a difference between being critiqued and being criticized.
Absolutely.
And when you're given a note, it's not a note about your skill. It's a note about the performance, what's needed in the scene. And it's important to be able to process the difference. And there are times when you may be criticized because your work's not good enough.
Absolutely.
But that's
Absolutely.
that's an individual conversation. But but you are supposed to be given notes because the director has to see the whole vision. So something may not be entirely clear to you individually. That's when I'm talking to directors. It's Brad Bird, who we've mentioned already, is one of the great communicators. Great communicators. But you are a piece of a jigsaw puzzle. Each artist is a piece of a jigsaw puzzle, and their work creates the picture.
Yeah. So that's the important thing. I think the message that you're sending out to our students is that it is important to collaborate. But I've seen a lot of young people take feedback personally. You have to separate the feedback from the individual. The feedback is not about you or your character. It is about your work. And if somebody is giving feedback, somebody is giving you a critique, it's important to take it because it's going to help you become a better technician, a better artist, a better professional. And that is very important lesson that Max is telling us today, right? And a lot of the students have this issue. And of course, even I had that. But the place where I went to, we were taught this thing about killing your own babies. And so it was important that you actually take the feedback in its entirety because it's coming from a point of view. Or even if you're not able to understand or comprehend it, ask questions, question everything. But it's important to accept that this feedback is for the betterment of the product. And that is a very, very important lesson that Max is telling us. So thanks, Max, for that. And I want to ask you a question. What is the greatest challenge in producing a film?
Money.
What do you think? Money. Okay. So how do you get money then? Because that's always going to be a challenge.
But you mentioned something that is part of my education when I'm teaching. What are the three most important things in creating an animated film? Number one is story. Number two is story. Number three is story. But a dear friend of mine made me laugh one day, and he went, "Actually, it's money, money, money." Which you need to get money. So as a producer, with a producer hat, you've got to raise the money, you've got to sell the movie, and that's not easy. But if you've got a good script and you've managed to put together a good team and perhaps some design work or an animation test, you're on that pathway. But the reality is it's finding the idea, and if you find a great idea, and then it will inspire everyone around you. I think I think it's most important, and create. You as a filmmaker, as a visionary, you know how important it is that once you bring the team on, it can no longer be your movie or my movie. It has to be our movie, because you have to allow or figure out how to get the crew to feel ownership of the movie.
Absolutely.
When it's tough, it's Diwali. I got to get this scene out. I got to finish. And you have to talk to the crew about, guys, can you tell your mum you're not going to be coming, you're going to be late, or you want the artist in a frame of mind where they almost come to you first and say, hey, I need to stay and finish this scene, because they feel it is important. It's the difference between, the salary, of course, the payment and everything, and the passion. And if you can balance that, and I'm not talking about people working for free. I'm just talking about people feeling invested and caring, really caring about what they're doing. And that's the role of the producer and the director, to make people feel part of it.
So I can tell you from my experience, Max, that I've been really blessed with, for most of my projects, I've had a very passionate team. I've had a team that for which the project, the film has been much larger than themselves. And it is something that has been a wonderful experience with working many individuals. Many of them are running their own studios right now. And I think that I can completely relate to what you're saying, in terms of the fact that, we need to build that ownership, and you need to have a more like an open source kind of a thing. So that brings me to the next question. We're just talking about films now, and we're talking about a specific genre. We're talking about films, like Disney said, I don't make films for children. I make films for the child in you. And we're talking about families, and we're talking about we're talking about family viewing films, and of course they do very well. But there is this new space that is coming in, and that is being allowed, which is a lot of us want to do some adult animation. And the OTT space is allowing that possibility, where you can make films for the adult, animated films for the adult, like Waltz with Bashir, but Waltz with Bashir was probably a too grim or too whatever. But there are many sort of series that are coming on the OTT platform. How do you think India can transcend from that? How do you see that?
Well, I think the platforms are now there. Netflix and all the streaming platforms offer that opportunity if you can get the numbers right, because you become part of subscription payments. So, and I think these platforms want to have a nice broad range of content to reach the widest possible audience, because and that's what's so fabulous about these platforms. You can do niche projects. Of course, the budget needs to be right. What I would say to people, yes, I mean, instead of saying I want to make films for an adult audience, just open your mind to just finding a great movie, or finding a great idea, then figuring out who it's for, how to make it. Because actually, I say to people, if you want to make a movie, what we should be saying in animation is you find a story and then decide how to make it. And should it be animation? And if it's animation, should it be CGI, stop motion, hand drawn, or should it be live action? Should it be made a completely different way?
I'm going to interrupt you, sorry, over here, because this is a very important distinction you're making. Should it be live action or should it be animation? How do you determine? Because I get a lot of scripts that I feel are live action, right? And people say, no, this needs to be done in animation, and I don't feel right about that. So what is it about when you read a script? What is it that tells you this is an animation script or this is a live action script? Is that
it could be a lot of practical reasons. There may be a famous actor attached, or a possibility to showcase, right? But you are looking for something in the fantastical. But one of my favorite films, and one of the most admired films in the world, and a film I did greenlight. I actually did say, we are making this movie, which is a rare thing to be able to, decide to spend that amount of money. Well, it was Brad Bird, and I found Brad, who had done a lot of good work, but he wasn't the director he has become. And The Iron Giant, that could be a live action film. In fact, it's all human characters, but when you tell something in animation, it can open up other things to you in terms of, I've used it particularly with UNICEF. The concept with UNICEF is, communicating health and social messages using animated characters.
Yes.
It can remove prejudice. It can allow you to
Yes.
look at something a little differently if it's animated,
Right.
because there's
Right.
a fantastical element to it. I think it's one of the advantages of it.
Right.
I mean, where is the line now between live action and animation anyway? I mean, everyone says, have you seen the live action at Lion King? And I go, yes. And I say, it's not a live action film. And they go, yes, it is. And I go, no, it's not. It's a completely animated recreation of the Lion King in a photorealistic look. But
Absolutely.
it is animated. So I actually, for all of you out there, animation is so unique. There's nothing that we see on TV. You know, you could be watching the news, you could be watching anything. There's always something to do with animation going on. TV commercials, but particularly, you know, live action. They can't make movies without the animation community.
Absolutely. And I think you were talking about UNICEF. So I want to know more about UNICEF, because I think that's where the Indian connect is for you as well. So for all of you who are not aware that Max has worked with India, and Max has an Indian connection, and we're going to talk more about that, of how Max has been associated. So Max, do you want to share with us about
I mean, it was almost accidental. When I was at Disney, somebody else was supposed to go and make a speech at UNICEF in what was then Czechoslovakia. It was quite a few years ago, and with a 24 hours notice, I was asked to go to Prague and make a speech on behalf of Disney about education or the use of animation. And I was part of a gathering of many people from the animation field, but in particular, I met some extraordinary people at UNICEF, extraordinary visionaries, and I started utilizing Disney resources under the leadership of Roy Disney. So because Mickey Mouse was the ambassador to the children of the world, but Disney didn't want Mickey directly addressing health and social, because it becomes so political, you know. And but I did films on child abuse. I did films on immunization, on salt in the diet. I was in Africa when they were in a war zone, making a film in the refugee camps with puppets. But anything we could do to try and get to children before they learn prejudice, because we're taught prejudice. We don't, you know, it's part of our culture, and it's something that we have to really be careful of, because our parents and our families give us their education, their culture, their family culture, their country's culture. And so when countries have had disputes in the past, or families have had disputes, you're not personally involved in the dispute, but your great-great-grandfather might have been. And somehow that prejudice is passed down. And we're still facing it around the world. We still see color. We still see ethnicity. And one day we won't. And this program was to try and get to kids before, and you know, let's take the case in Africa, Hutus and Tutsis, two African peoples who coexisted pretty violently for many, way before the British or anybody colonized Africa. And we get there just to try and teach, you know, that because it's nothing, when you see very young children, you know, in a kindergarten environment of mixed race, there's absolutely, you know, they don't see any prejudice, but they learn it. They learn it from their friends, and we're seeing it all over the world at the moment with these, you know, we see color, and one day we must not. Anyway, it was an effort to do that, but the point was, if I put an animated character saying these words, I'm not immediately prejudicial myself. It's not a Muslim. It's not a Jew. You know, it's not a. You know, you can keep all of that out of it. And so we created little animated characters, and very simple. And but I enjoyed the work, and it was also a great thing for some of the Disney animators who were working on, you know, to you know, between movies or when there's some downtime to work on something like this. I think it gave them an enormous amount of satisfaction that they were giving back in some way. And so it was a great program, and I've continued to be friends with them. But you had a fantastic UNICEF series in India, Meena.
Yep. Mina,
The
yeah.
girl
I worked
child,
on
yeah.
it too. I worked on a few episodes.
So I knew all the people in New
Yeah.
York, and so,
Yeah.
but that was a very, very important program.
Yeah.
You worked on it.
Yeah.
How important
Yeah.
was that, and how powerful it was to be able to do it through animation?
Yeah, it was.
And
It
that
was so.
the key. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can understand. And for those of you who haven't seen the Meena series, it's available, I think, on YouTube. It's a cult series, and it was made by India's father of Indian animation, Ram Mohan. He's no longer with us, but God bless his soul. But he's a wonderful guy, and he designed the character. And incidentally, something about Meena that you bring it up, that it became so popular in the entire Indian subcontinent that there was an African version of the same thing also made called the Sara series. So exactly the same characters, the same stories. Of course, their problems were slightly different, but exactly this. I mean, the characters were of course modified and they were redesigned to make them look African. So it's a very powerful medium, and it created waves there. So yeah, I can completely vouch for it. I mean, I know that. Yeah.
Yes, I did.
But
Anyway, I did a lot of work with them, and it was.
yeah,
As I said,
yeah,
that's an important use of animation. And we're talking about documentaries. I mean, these are the types of almost transitions into that.
right,
There's another way to use animation, and that's what we
right,
must do as
right,
filmmakers: is realize that
right.
animation is so powerful. It
Yeah,
doesn't need to just be restricted to a particular
right.
genre of movies.
Right, right. So I'm coming to the next question, and I'm sure a lot of people over here would be very, very interested that you are really, really good in pitching scripts. And I believe you also do these master classes in pitching and stuff, right? And
Yeah.
so I want to know, I think all of us would be interested in knowing what is the mantra, what is the success, what is the recipe, what is the secret behind it, and how actually you can bring pitches alive. How do you actually go about doing that?
Well, you practice, but equally, you have to know what your story is really about. And so I can talk
Right.
to you about the chance meeting with somebody, the chance
Right.
meeting with you, or the chance meeting with Steven Spielberg, and you didn't know you were going to meet Steven Spielberg. Because we don't know what's going to happen, but suddenly you find yourself with somebody.
Right. Right.
If you could get over your nerves, and if you read the environment correctly, that you must be very aware of who he is, where he is, who's he talking to. But if you had that moment alone with him, what would you say? You can't pitch your entire movie, but is there something you could say that would say to him, I can't believe you just approached me, but I like that little idea. Here's my number, call my assistant, tell her you're the very cheeky Indian student who stopped me in the elevator or on the lift, and I will meet with you.
Yes.
Okay. So that preparation is so important, and recognizing chance. So, I'll often carry a flash drive with me with whatever I've got. A flash drive in my pocket. So in this day and age, we can carry things around with us. You can't carry your portfolio around. In the old days, you can carry a little flash drive or something. So always be prepared. However, let's talk about you've got that meeting. You arrive. The meetings, you've got 30 minutes. Well, the meeting starts 7 minutes late because let's take Steven Spielberg, was on the phone. He had a very important call. But he comes in and his assistant says, okay, sorry I kept you waiting, because they're always very polite. Sorry, come on in. And then he says to the assistant, look, make sure we're not disturbed. I really want to concentrate on this. So you start. And then 5 minutes into the pitch, the phone goes. Well, if the phone went, something really important just happened. And so now now he's distracted and everything else like that. So the whole point of this story is you might have half an hour,
right?
But don't use half an hour. You need to get in the room, read the room, be polite, be concise, be committed, and don't offer any excuses. And by that, I mean, you want to be committed, because I might not like your idea, but I want you to like your idea. I don't want you asking me what I'm looking for, what type of, as though you could satisfy you've got a great idea and you love it. And what's more, you were able to describe the idea in a concise way that I was able to understand it to be able to make a judgment call. So if I didn't like it, at least I understood it. I've rejected projects because I didn't understand the project, because the pitch wasn't clear. And then I don't want anyone to waste any time saying, oh, you know, Mr. Spielberg, I didn't know I was going to meet you in the elevator. Oh, my friend was supposed to deliver, you know, 3 designs today, but I don't have them. You know, don't make any excuses. It wastes time. It's not about arrogance. But you can only pitch what you have. You can't pitch what you don't have. You pitch, it's like a cake. You're going to cut the cake, and it's whatever the cake is. It's whatever you have, because what is a pitch? It could be the finished movie you're trying to sell. It could be just the concept you're trying to sell. It could be a script and so it's whatever you have when the opportunity comes along, and recognize it's an opportunity. Because if you pitch to me and I reject the idea, but I thought you pitched it well, and I thought you didn't waste time, you didn't make excuses, and you loved your project, you were committed, you can come back again another time with another project, because because in a way you're also presenting yourself. Okay, so they're and I go into more detail in this my pitching talk, but that's the essence of it. Be committed, love your idea. That's because I don't love it. It might be right. I might say, oh, Kareem, I've got a very similar film that I'm working on. So although it's not the same story, but it's reaching the same audience, or it could be all sorts of reasons. But I'm going to look at you and go, wow. This is somebody I'm going to remember, and that's also part of that it's an opportunity.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to encapsulate for everybody that having the elevator pitch. Navjot, basically, when the elevator pitch is, the term elevator pitch is just a term. Basically, you can bump into any important person, and you need to be ready, and you need to be able to narrate your idea. So you need to know the log line of your idea very well. Okay, and that is very important. And so you need to be able to very, very concisely, in a minute, maybe 30 seconds, you need to tell your idea in a powerful way where somebody takes notice and say, hey, that's not bad. I can, it's not necessarily meeting people in the elevator. You can bump them into a party, you can bump them into a shoot, or you can bump them into a studio, or wherever you're going, or whatever. And so it's important to understand that, you have to know the story. What is your film all about? That's what Max talked about, right? And
you
it's
have
to know the log line. It's about the theme. It's about what is important.
We know there's going to be know there's going to be a car chase, a fight, a chase, or this or that. It's the emotional area that we want to know. Albert Einstein made a very interesting quote. He said, and one of the great inventors, he said, if you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand the idea. I think it's a great quote. So if you can't articulate it in a very few words, then your idea is not ready.
Absolutely. So here's what I'm saying, that there are many questions that are coming in there. A lot of these questions are very personal, so we're not going to be taking that, because it's about pertaining to you, and you can reach out to any of the industry experts and get those things answered. We're going to be answering questions pertaining to Max. So we have a question from Chirag Acharya, and he's saying, we have a question from Amay Mehta, and he's saying, how was your experience working with the Lion King movie? And I would love to know that as well. So that'd be great.
Well, it was fantastic. Like all these films, the film was considered a disaster while it was being made. We'd gone through a very difficult time at Disney, because we got, as I said, we grew very fast, right? We got more and more people, because we started trying to release a movie every year, and that meant a great expansion. And we used to have everyone working on the same movie. And after Aladdin, we divided the crew into two, A and B. The B crew, and it's a lesson in management, actually, we had A and B, and B became interpreted as second, number two, second best.
Okay.
And half the animators went to Pocahontas or artists, and half went to The Lion King. But the Pocahontas was to be the big film, because it was in the style of the girl princess movie. It was much more a Disney film, and so The Lion King, it wasn't a musical. and it was with animals. So we thought that was really weird. And the script wasn't quite ready. And the middle act was confusing, and the whole circle of life. And hang on a second, lions eat animals, you know. But out of this chaos and very, very difficult situation, and thanks to the extraordinary, you know, work of Tim Rice's lyrics and of course Elton John's extraordinary songs, and Hans Zimmer music and the orchestrations. I mean, this thing evolved. It's interesting, you know, the character Rafiki only came in the last 6 months, and it was very interesting to see it evolve into something. But some people could see that it had a potential. And I have a personal example. The first time I heard one of Elton John's tracks was Can You Feel the Love Tonight? And he was just doing chord progressions. He just, you know, like I'm speaking to you now, just, you know, at home, just had a piano, had a little deck on the top, so the recording was terrible, no orchestrations, just chords. And because I come from musical theater and my background in the theater, I've learned to be able to recognize a tune. It's like being able to read a script and realizing it's good. It's an art. It's an experience. It's something you can learn. And I heard it, and a lot of people saying, "Oh my God, you know, Elton John, you know," because he wasn't famous. I mean, he had been famous, but in the 90s he wasn't famous. You know, he was an aging pop star. And I heard this song and I went, wow, you know, I heard it, and of course it's a great, you know, they're all great songs. And we saw Elton John come up. So you know, that was it was a troubled film because when you divide your crew in two, not everybody wants to be in the team they've been allocated to, you know, because, you know, the great Glenn Keane went to do Pocahontas. You know, he created the Beast, and he created Little Mermaid, and, you know, the great. So Glenn was over there, you know, so everyone was divided up. So it created, and it was change, and change is difficult for people. Whenever you change something, we needed to change because it was incredibly inefficient to make a movie with 600 people or whatever the number. So if you divide it, the efficiency goes up, the quality goes up, and the ability for the directors to direct is increased because they can manage a smaller crew. So I have a personal story to tell you, is that in preparation for the movie, you know, and it's one of the luxuries that we did, is of course we would bring lions into the studio for people to draw. And I was in Florida with the Florida team, and there was a sound stage there, and I'd arranged for one of the great wildlife experts in America to come and give a talk and bring a lion with him. So I asked a lioness, a full-grown lioness, and I was asked I said, so what do we need to get food? I mean, and they said, oh yeah, the lioness likes chicken, preferably with the feathers still on. Don't skin the chicken.
Oh, wow.
That was perfect. So it was early. We'd set up a little platform stage, and we'd set up chairs and drawing tablets and tables for about 50 or 60 of the artists. So I like to go and check things out early in the morning. So I walked into the soundstage, you know, about an hour before the event was supposed to be started, and there was a little ante room off the soundstage where the lion was kept in its cage, and I was completely alone. And I walked and I turned the corner into this little ante room to discover the lion cage was open.
Oh my God.
And the lion was on the floor, just stretched out. And I walked, and I literally turned the corner, and I was 3 foot from a full-size lioness.
Wow.
And I remember backing out very slowly.
Absolutely.
That was thankfully the lioness had been fed. She'd had her chicken. Otherwise, it might have been me.
Yeah. So I would like to share this information with our students right now, that Disney has had a long-standing tradition of actually referencing from life. So even for Fantasia, when they were making, you know, the volcanoes, they would actually have a entire vat full of broth, and then they would put bubbles in there just to study how it is. Or even for Bambi, right? 1939 classic Bambi, the one they got deers, and they actually sketched a newborn deer. So one of the deers was actually, she was pregnant, and she, when she delivered the child, they actually studied, and that shows how beautiful that sequence there is. And there is a wonderful book called The Illusion of Life, which is a book that everybody should own. All the students should own this book. It's called The Illusion of Life by Ollie Johnston and Frank Thomas, who are among the 9 great men at Disney. And it is a book that everybody should have, and it's a book that everybody should study. It's something that is remarkable, and it's got nothing to do with 2D, 3D software. This thing that is purely about the art of animation. It's about the craft of animation, and that is something that I get a lot of questions. What about software? What about this? Those are not important. What is important is that you know your art of animation very well, the art of storytelling, the art of referencing from life, and everything that we know about it. So now, Max, my next question to you is about about India, right? You work with India, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about that, and what were the challenges of working with India? And I mean, of course, India has advantages as well, that we have the technicians and the artists over here can be come to you for about a fifth of the price, so you have a wage arbitrage there. But what are the challenges that you faced here, along with the good things as well?
Okay, so where I am, it's 10 minutes after the hour. Where you are, it's 40 minutes after the hour.
Okay. Yeah, so that's one of the things. But it's not that bad in America.
No, but it's the fact it's on a half hour. I always never work out whether I'm to take the half hour off the hour or add it to the hour. So it confuses the world. That's my flippant answer to working in India. But even the course, I'm always confused about what time we're starting. So the time zone. I'm going to list the advantages actually, and there are many. And there are many on a personal level. The number one is the ability for so many people to be able to communicate in English. I think that's a massive plus for India, and it's proved to be so. Yes, of course, there's been a cost factor here. You've had a marriage of an expansion in animation, a place to do it for a lower cost, with a relatively high quality. Let's talk about quality for a minute. I feel India, well, you have a film industry. It may be a film industry that tells films stories in a different fashion, in a different storytelling mode, the great Bollywood movies, musicals. But nevertheless, there's a filmmaking tradition and there's a love of movies, and that's ingrained. I think that's really important in the DNA of India. The influx of foreign studios, Technicolor, DreamWorks, everyone who's been and working with India, Mad Max, at Crash, did lots of work with everyone's interface. I've just finished a film called 100% Wolf as an executive producer out of Sydney, Australia. I think some of that work ended, went to India via the London studio, who changed its name recently, Reinvent, Rejuvenate. Prime Focus is the company.
Prime Focus has done 100% Wolf, is it?
Yeah, I think it worked on it because they sent some of the work to India, but that's an internal thing. They could have gone to Toronto. I wasn't so involved in how it was produced. Right. But these international interactions, it could have been, with Mike Young originally and all the TV shows. This has allowed the quality of the work in India to increase, and it has got better and better and better. Yeah. I mean, there is a saying in India, and I think every country has its idiosyncrasies. There's a saying that I've heard, which is, if you work with India, they overpromise and underdeliver. And I think it's a really important thing to understand this. In any of our enthusiasm to want to get a job or say something's possible, it's no good ever saying something that cannot be achieved. And I think that's so important. And you don't have to say the impossible is possible, because it isn't. People desperately want to work with India. It's a great place to work on a personal level. Culturally, I'm so at home, because of course I'm British by birth. You alluded to the beginning. I love Indian food. In fact, I made quite a good curry the other day, and I do my best. It's not as good, but I like India. I passionately like Indian food. Masala dosas, please. Thank you very much. I love. So that's a treat for me coming to India. And the other thing, of course, is cricket. So you have this. If I go to China, it's a much more enclosed society, much more challenging to deal with, much less English spoken. So just doing something there. I do spend a lot of time in China. But India doesn't. India has this outward look at the world. It's much more part of the planet Earth, and is a great influencer, and will be an even greater influencer as time goes by. Let alone the great culture that's behind all the potential for great storytelling in a Western style, or a Western structure, 3-act structure, not Western, but a traditional structure, but Indian content, Indian story.
Yeah. So we have a couple of very interesting questions. One is from Ranjit, Tony. Tony is also the co-founder of TASI, and he's saying, considering that 2D animation and the work of Disney and the other greats is the foundation of the animation industry world over, what is your view on the closing down of 2D animation at Disney?
Oh, I think it was a mistake. The thing, 2D is much harder to do. It's much harder to maintain a high level of quality. But as my partner Doi says, who you've met, and she's not from an animation world at all, but she said something to me. She said that what I love about 2D is the imperfection. Imperfection. You can feel the artist's hand on the screen.
Right.
In an Aardman movie, where they make with plasticine, stop motion, often you can see the thumbprints in the. And I took to that. I like that, because I think one of the things with CGI, there is a disconnect between the artist and the audience in that fashion. What I hope will happen, should happen, will happen, does happen to some extent, is Klaus last year, the film, that's a hand-drawn movie, and I was very pleased to see it. And I'm hoping that one day we'll look at filmmaking and we'll go, okay, so first of all, is it live action or animation? What's the best way of telling this story? And then, okay, I'm going to choose animation. What's the best animation medium to bring this film to life? Is it stop motion? Is it motion capture? Is it? Now, as an independent producer, not affiliated to a story, to a studio, I can make those distinctions. I can decide and say, oh yeah, I'd like to do it this way or that way, and then work with the appropriate studio to do that. Of course, if I am a studio and I am a 2D studio or I'm a 3D studio, that's all I'm going to make, because that's my expertise. But I'm hoping, much is the same as live action, a live action director and producer will figure out the best way of making that movie. Who are the right actors to use? Who's the right cameraman? Who's the right editor? Who can I get? The composer and everything. And I'm hoping that our industry will do the same way, because I agree. 2D animation, is everything it's built on. But in a way, I could say that all the animation art that we have is built. We can go back and back to the great, to cave painters by Leonardo da Vinci. It's an extension of that, because it's moving art. And what a fabulous way of telling a story.
My question is coming from the fact that I think I just want to extend that question a bit more. And this is again Ranjit's question again. So I just want to ask you, because we have a lot of students right now, okay, and many of them have simply done their 12th or graduation, and they're straight away getting into the animation. They are not initiated to the arts necessarily. They are getting straight into the software, the modeling, the texturing, and whatever. So how important it is for for the individuals to learn 2D and the classical animation principles? How important is that, you think, for the new generation, and what is the advice that you would be giving them? What is the route that you would be advising them?
Yes, you should. You should study it. You should study all filmmaking, but you should also, think about your future. What do you want to do? Why did you never forget, in all those dark and difficult times when you may be working, you have to remember why you wanted to get into animation. Never forget that. Put that up on the wall behind you. Why I wanted to get in the business. And then where do you want to go? I mean, if you want to be your own filmmaker or one day be a director or anybody working, watch movies. It doesn't matter what movie, live action, animation, watch movies, get to understand story structure, get to understand different types of movie and understand how the director is manipulating you. And that's what a director is doing. They're going to make you laugh, or they're going to make you cry, they're going to make you care. If they don't do any of those things, then perhaps the movie didn't work. And sometimes studying movies that don't work and figuring out why can be a fantastic training exercise. If you just say, I didn't like a movie, it's great. Sit down with a bunch of friends and don't discuss whether it's good or bad or whether you like it or didn't like it. Discuss if you didn't like it, where were those moments? Because essentially, if you didn't like a movie, it's because you didn't care. You didn't care what the characters were having to deal with. You didn't relate to the characters, and so you became disengaged. And so the director didn't capture you, didn't bring you in. And so studying movies, any form of storytelling is the number one. The software that you've learned is your pencil. It is the integral part of you being able to fulfill your ambition. You need to learn all of the techniques, but they're tools for being able to bring a story to life, but they're not tools for creating a story, inventing a story. They are tools, and never, ever forget that. I want to say something about rigging, because I want to see, if an animator picks up a pencil and draws on a piece of paper, his rig is in his pencil. It's in his ability.
Absolutely.
He can squash it or stretch it as much as he likes.
Absolutely.
And the rigging of a CG character has to involve the animator, because we have to consider what we want because I don't like it when we get fixed looks.
Right.
For raising one eyebrow, you get these fixed expressions because that's what the rig can do, and we fall into you read a book until you want to show anger. So you do an anger expression. You want to say happy. To me, these are superficial expressions, because the expression must come from the inside, manifested from what the character's saying. And so we must look for anything we can to allow the expressions of the characters to become very sophisticated, but also for the animator to understand how to use it correctly. I've been gesturing a lot. If you were seeing my full body, you'd know that I never stop moving and waving my hands and everything else like that. Sometimes in animation, I feel the characters move too much. There's too much movement and gesturing because we want to say something. I'm really angry with you. We say, and I want just, actually, do we have that clip from The Lion King?
Yes,
can we show that clip from The Lion King?
Vishal, can you play that, please? Yeah, go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I want to show you some great acting.
And so
I'm just going to say, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Can you recommend some books for our students for acting in animation?
Yeah, I think you get Ed Hooks' books on acting for animators. It's fantastic.
Yes,
Ed Hooks.
acting. Yes.
Yeah, I think Ed's my primary one on that. But you could look at Michael Caine's book on acting. I mean, many actors have written. There are books training actors to act, and I think understanding how an actor trains is beneficial for an animator to understand their thought process, because any actor will tell you what's going on the inside. What's the subtext? What's the character saying? What's he thinking about? Go.
All right.
Are you ready to show the clip?
No, we seem to have misplaced the clip, so I'm really sorry about that. But I would like to reiterate, the acting for animators, and of course, even Stanislavski is there, right? What do you think about Stanislavski? He's the guy who.
Well, I think exactly right. So, the method, Stanislavski was the great Russian actor trainer, and he is considered to be the father of modern method acting. And method acting came to the fore in cinema in the 1950s. Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, they're all method actors, Dustin Hoffman. And there's a difference, and people have different approaches. These are actors who get inside the character. In fact, I once recorded John Cusack for a movie, and of course, because of animation, he's such a great actor. But you record him, and I didn't meet him for a year or more because we got the recording, but I need to go and redo some dialogue with him. And when he came back, he was a completely different personality. And I realized that when I recorded him the first time, he was doing a light-hearted comedy, and when we recorded him the second time, he was doing a psychological thriller, and you could feel it in his. He was sort of still in character, I mean, it's not that once we told him and reminded him of the part that he was playing, he was fabulous. It was great, but it was really interesting. But I think this is all relevant. I think it's understanding the craft of performance and seeing what parts of that craft apply to you or apply to animation. It's part of making you incredibly experienced. We've talked about Brad Bird a couple of times. Brad Bird has directed live action films.
Yes,
he's an animation director.
Mission Impossible is one of the films.
Yeah, and conversely, there's no. I mean, I've worked with live action directors who, had to direct animation, and you can guide them through. The time you give a note is different, but the note's the same. We don't edit a movie. We edit the movie at the beginning. A live action movie edits it much later at the end because they can film so much more. So the processes are different. But the note, the critique doesn't change. It's just when to give it. But remember, if you're working in the animation industry, you're a filmmaker. You're working in the film industry, and animation is a piece of the film industry. But it all lives together, and it all benefits from each other. I talk to writers, live action writers who've never written for animation. And they say to me, what's the secret of writing for animation? I said, no. Everything you've learned as a writer is completely 100% applicable. You're creating dialogue to make characters multidimensional and interesting. You tell me what you're going to leave out because you're making an animated film. It's nothing. You may be bringing an inanimate object to life. You may be bringing an animal to life. But the reality is all those objects and all those animals, when they speak and when they think, they are human beings dressed up in those things. They're human emotions performed as an animal or as an inanimate object. So everything is applicable from live action back to animation.
Okay. Well, we're completely out of time, and I have a whole list of questions that I wanted to actually ask you, but it seems like we will not have too much. So we're going to extend a little bit. I just wanted to know, I can actually smell something, right? Is there some aroma in your room? What are you cooking nowadays? I mean, what are you making in your kitchen?
Well, I could actually give me 1 second, and I will, because I'm doing a dal dish, but it's a dal curry rather than a takada. But I was doing it last night because today I'm going to try and make a bengan bata. Bengan bata, but I have to practice that. But let me show you my lentils.
The lentils.
I'm coming.
Can you show the lentils? Where is it? There you go, Max.
Yeah,
so what is this? Is it some kind of rice?
That's a Rogan ghost, and this is being cooked at the moment. So this is my one today. That's a dal curry. But yeah, what you're looking at in the photograph is a Rogan ghost. It's with lamb, so it's non-veg, I'm afraid. But it's with a raita and some poppadoms, and I can't remember the other curry that I did there. Perhaps I think maybe a cauliflower bhaji or something. Anyway, you could tell I can't make dosas. I love dosas. But yeah, I love Indian food. This isolation has been very good for my cooking skills. I have things I normally don't have
Oh
time to
man, awesome. So I'm gonna. I believe you're a cricket buff and you play a lot as well, right? You play cricket. I
do.
believe. You know,
Yeah.
Mac, I gotta talk. I gotta tell everybody else. Like, he claims to be a cricket buff and he claims to be knowing all the statistics and everything. I don't think so. I mean, I think you guys can probably ask him some questions and probably we can test his knowledge in cricket. And he thinks that he knows all the statistics of Dhoni and all the statistics of all the other people. I don't watch cricket too much, but if you have
Well, I'm
some.
surprised at you, Kareem.
I'm a fake Indian. I don't like cricket all that much.
I've seen Tendulkar play, and I've met Sunil Gavaskar because I'm the MC because I play originally in England, but there's a cricket league in America, and one of the jobs that I do at the annual awards banquet, which is held in November every year, a big dinner for all the players, about 400 or 500 people. We always bring a guest of honor, a guest speaker. And 2 years ago, we brought Sunil Gavaskar to speak. So I got to meet him. But every year, last year it was Courtney Walsh, the great West Indian fast bowler. And so, I've actually held a bat in the is it the University Cricket Grounds in the middle of Mumbai, surrounded by the university. But I've been to Eden Gardens as well, which is I was in Calcutta, and I managed. There was no game going on, but I went to the players area and I explained that I was from Los Angeles and a part of the Southern California Cricket Association, and they let me in. They took me through the players' dressing rooms and onto the ground. So I've stood on the ground at Eden Gardens. Oh yeah, I love cricket. I think it's the world's greatest sport, and not least of which because of the attitude with which people interact with each other. I think it's a great sport. It's a great way of life. So yeah, I love cricket, and I'm blessed that I also love animation and Indian food. What could be wrong with that?
There you go. There's strong Indian connect. So I have a question from Mayur Arun, right? So he's saying that what is the memory of a project working in the industry that you cherish the most?
These are lovely questions because there are projects that you might treasure which may not have been the most successful. And The Iron Giant, I suppose, is a treasured film because I was, head of the studio, gave the project to Brad Bird or asked Brad to look at several projects. He chose that one. And so, I was very much in the creation of that film. It's also based on a most important bit of literary work. It's Ted Hughes, the English poet laureate, was based on his original children's book. So it had a very important British connections for me to my heritage, my culture. So I suppose that one. But I love Beauty and the Beast, and of course Roger Rabbit, and there's not ones I don't really like. They all had their moments of, but I suppose it is The Iron Giant.
Oh,
I
wow.
like Space Jam too.
Yeah, it's a wonderful film, and it's got a great controlling idea, and I think I really love.
Hey, Kareem, I loved your live action. You did a live action animated film, which I remember seeing.
Yeah, Tunpur.
Yeah. That's when we first met, I think.
It was the first time. Yeah. We met for the first time there. Okay, we have a question from Divakar Kupan, and he says a few words of your experience with working with Richard Williams.
Richard was, Richard recently left us, passed away.
Yes.
I think he wasn't quite sure who I was really to begin with, because I didn't come from his industry, and I was very much the eyes and ears of Disney. I was worked for Disney, and he had a studio in London, and he was a little bit of a maverick as a filmmaker. And so over the years, and from Roger Rabbit, we became good friends, and I'm a particularly very, very close friend of his son, Alex Williams, who runs is a great animator and runs Escape Studios in London, which is an animation school. And I worked with Alex a lot and remained very close to Dick and over all those years. And he was the best, but he was also the bridge, because Kareem mentioned Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson, who wrote The Illusion of Life. They were the part of Disney's 9 Old Men. You know, another generation older than Richard Williams. But the great animators that I worked with would be the Glenn Keanes, who were all very young men. And Dick was the bridge between the old men. And when he started, it was at a time when animation was in somewhat of a decline. He's part of the Renaissance, bringing it back. So he was the bridge. And then, of course, he has a masterful book, you know, the Animator's Survival Guide or Survival Kit, which is the other great, you know, animation book that everyone should see and hear. But yeah, I had a lot of time for Richard, and of course, what about that for a first film? Not only am I working on Roger Rabbit, but I'm working with, you know, the greatest living animator as he was at that time. He was and all these great animators. So yeah, I got to work with the best and learn from the best.
So there's a question from someone. He says, do you think AI would replace the 3D artist? People are insecure. No.
Yeah, we should be. Well, I think, you know, the whole pandemic and everything we're living through at the moment. I mean, I didn't know what Zoom was 3 months ago. Yeah. And now I'm an expert. You know, and thanks to Kareet, you know, and everybody at Frameboxx and today the vision for setting this up. We've all found different ways of communicating. I mean, a few months ago, I wouldn't have been able to do this online. None of us would. It was like, oh, that doesn't work. You need to come to India. So we're all learning new ways to do things. I think, yeah. I mean, everything could be. A robot's not going to cook my dal. You know, it's not going to cook my Rogan goat.
Not for some time.
It will be able to do it, but you know what it won't have in it? It won't have soul. It won't have heart. It won't have the human touch. And so, you know, I think all of these things, what we have to remember is that we are the audience. We may be the filmmakers, but we're also the audience. What do we want? What do you want in your life? And because ultimately, we want everything that's convenient. We want these wonderful apps that do things. We want wonderful software programs. We like some motion capture and things like that. But they're tools to make our life better and the films we make better. They're not to replace that. And I think, there's economic barriers, but I think, you know, with this pandemic at the moment, the world is not going to ever be what it was. We're going through a very sped up evolution. And there will be people within this evolution who will figure out a new pathway. Normally, there's no ability to go on a different pathway because we're just doing the same thing. We've had an amazing change, and it needn't necessarily be negative, but it's up to the individual to see the opportunity. It's an amazing. We talked earlier about, you know, these platforms. You know, we've got the distribution has changed. The way in which we buy things, you know, I now shop completely differently to how I used to go to the shop.
Absolutely, all of us.
All of us, and the way I buy things online now. I do online shopping. So, and I think a lot of this and a lot of the meetings that I will continue to have when all of this is behind us will continue on these types of platforms. You know, the ability for me to be talking to you today from the UK. You know, staring at a little green dot on my laptop, so I can look you directly in the eye. Absolutely. You know, and imagine that you're all there. And of course, when Kareet first mentioned this to me, I'm going, shall we? And through an there's amazing team behind what we're doing this morning. Right. And there's an amazing group who are putting all of this together. Who managed to call me this morning to make sure that I was here and up, and you know, we've made it work. You know, we're attempting to make it work. Would I rather be with you in an auditorium and seeing you all? Of course.
But this is as good as it gets. Yeah, this is the second best.
And there are certain aspects of this that I think I'm better for. You know, I've been looking at, reviewing some work of students. This is not an invitation to send me things. But at Escape Studios, I'm on their advisory board, and I'll look at some of the student projects. And normally I'd go in the classroom or in the, you know, into the where they work, and I'd look with them on a screen. Well, now, you know, when they show me their work, I can actually, you know, control it and go back and forth and look at certain things. It's created a much more intimate experience for me looking at their work, which I hadn't anticipated. And I thought that was a plus, you know. So,
So
yeah.
we have a very interesting question from a very talented animator, Suchana Shah. She was also won one of the awards that we were giving out. And she has a question that a few independent animators who you really like.
Independent animate. Well, if somebody's sitting asking me questions, which I quite like him. He's quite nice. That's you, well,
Thank you, I'm flattered.
From the moment we met, we had a sort of, you know,
Right.
camaraderie. We were introduced by the wonderful Shelley Page. And,
Right.
yes, I think there are. Well, I think Tom Moore in Ireland, Tom Moore's work in Ireland. I think we should did something interesting. He didn't give up on 2D. He's got his thing going now. Of course, he's a clever fellow, amazingly talented, and there are certain subsidy systems within Europe where the various countries can work together to produce a film. But I think Tom's work is excellent, and he's been working with Norlem, who are a small studio in Denmark, who I like enormously. Klaus Togsvig is the one of the principals there. They're doing a lot of excellent work. There's always great animation coming out of France. You know, wonderful animation schools. Emile Cole, of course. Gobelin and Supinfocom. And of course, you had DSK Supinfocom in India. I'm not sure it's still operating. But
it's not there. It's not there.
It's
anymore.
not, but so, you know, I think what's been going on in France is really good. I loved. I thought what Sony did last year. I'm talking a bigger movie now with the Spider-Verse. I thought that was excellent. And what I really liked about it is they were doing their own thing and not trying to emulate others. And I would, you know, for the geniuses in our world at the moment, I'd still look no further than Nick Park, who I think is you know, absolutely brilliant, talented director, you know, and has been since he was a student, of course. I mean, there's an example of somebody, you know, their student film is brilliant. They went to work for Aardman immediately, made great films there, you know. So, but yeah, I think they're my, Tom, I put very much up there as an independent. I'm just trying to think of some others. I mean, there are people everywhere that I, you know, there's little pockets, little artists, and that's what I love about our industry at the moment. You know, when I started, there was Disney. There wasn't really anybody else. There was Disney. And then when CGI started, there really wasn't much going on beyond Pixar. But, you know, in those days, the hardware and software were proprietary. I mean, you know, it was everything was so expensive. And what I love about our industry at the moment, goes for live action as well, is that the tools that you need in order to make a film, the capital investment, is so much less than it was those years ago. You know, the power of the computers that we're communicating on today are capable of running and operating, creating, you know, wonderful animation. When I started, it was an SGI, it was a Silicon Graphics computer. I think it used to cost $250,000 to set somebody up, set one artist up. And you had to have a, you know, massive group of technicians. So I love the fact all the tools are available. So what is it about now? It's about talent. The barrier to entry, being the equipment and everything goes with it, has gone, comparatively speaking. So with what we've seen around the world, a lot of great boutique studios. You know, the studio I mentioned I'm working with at the moment, Flying Bark in Sydney in Australia. The group in South Africa, whose name escapes me, who did Kumbar, and they've done 2 or 3 films, but you know, a South African studio. All the work that's gone on, Kirby Atkins' new film, Mosley, you know, an fiercely independent film, took 10 years to make, raised the money. That film's just been completed and released. So, you know, I just delight in the fact that there are all these films, you know, still compared to the number of live action films produced every year, a tiny amount. But I love the fact that we're seeing all these different types of movies, which in turn will lead to this broadening of the type of films that we make. You know, harking back to what I spoke about earlier about more adult stories being told using animation. I think it's a fabulous time. Because
That's
there's
great.
opportunity here.
Yeah. So we have a question from Brian DeCosta. Brian is working with Sony. By the way, I got to share with everybody, and thank you all for being here, and thank you Frameboxx for making it a great success. We have more than 7,000 people right now. We have more than 7,000 people right now actually listening into Max. So that's an overwhelming. It's an incredible thing. So thank you so much, Frameboxx, and thank you to all our partners for having made it possible. I think it's fantastic. So coming back to Brian's question. Animation is the only industry not hit hard by this pandemic because it's always been easier to work from home in animation. Do you think it will reap the same productivity or better results? This is his question because it's a relevant question.
Brian, I love this question, Brian. I think, because of course we have been able to keep working because, as I said at the beginning of the talk, animators essentially, which is also part of the challenge for making an animated film, is the actual creation of your work is done alone. It's not done with somebody else. You're not feeding off somebody else. So we can continue. The studios have always been nervous about people working from home for reasons of security and the upside, and I don't think it'd be lost, is as we're learning to use Zoom and these other communication tools, because we've had to, the studios have had to recognize that to make their films, artists have got to work from home. The plus side is, as an artist, Brian, I know what you're like, but some people are night owls. I got a writer friend of mine who, kids go to bed, and he writes well into the early hours. That's his quiet time. I would tell you that I am useless, in the evenings. I can't, early mornings, I get up at 5:30 every day. That's my time. That's my most creative time. So the idea that an individual artist's most creative time would be under their control, I find very exciting. Well, all the interfaces work correctly, sending stuff in, whatever tracking programs Shotgun or anything else. So I like that. So I think they're all and of course, from a studio point of view, ultimately, you can have a smaller studio. You can have a differently configured studio because the artist won't have a set work desk. I'm talking generally, and I think you need to look at individual departments. I think the story department being isolated is a little more problematical, but I think you have to figure out artificial ways of coming together. If you're all in the same location or you're all in Mumbai, you come to the studio once a week, because you do need that interaction. You also need a fabulous director who's comfortable with communicating in the way we're communicating today. But, I think it's a real plus. One of the stories I read out of Hollywood recently is the live action slate of movies in development at some studios. They were looking at their live action slate and thinking, I wonder which one of these films could be reimagined and made as an animated film, because our live action filmmaking is so challenging at the moment. And that's going to continue.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know they're back filming again, but until we solve this virus, until we cure it, until we find a vaccine, we're going to be living under some sort of isolated conditions or distance working for a long time. That's an advantage. The animation industry over the years has seldom had advantages. And this is ours. It's here and it's now, and you've got all these platforms out there that need content. The amount of films that Netflix, it's a very, very exciting time for the industry. Very exciting.
No, so
out of something terrible.
Yeah, we're completely running out of time. I wish I could have spoken for you for much longer, but there's a couple of questions before we actually wrap up our session. One of them is, of course, what are you working on now?
Well, part of me can't tell you because what I'm doing at the moment is I'm developing a script about multiculturalism. I can't give you the detail of it, but again, talking theme and pitching, because I'm particularly interested in this subject matter because I think it's important at the moment. No film should be a preachy film, but I think it should have some relevance. So, a film about characters learning to become tolerant of each other and recognizing the strength in each other. So I have that project that that we're working. I've been working on
Fantastic.
some classic stories, and I'm also always developing and working on Chinese stories. Because
wow.
as part of my work in China, I unearthed, I got to work on the development of Mulan before I left Disney for Warner Brothers. And back then, we found this story, but I didn't realize how important the story was to the Chinese people. And upon going to China, of course, they've got many, many great stories. Similar themes, funnily enough. They have Romeo and Juliet style stories and Cinderella style stories, but they've got a wonderful culture. So I've been looking at how to adapting some of those stories. I'm always particularly interested in local culture of how it can adapt, because I don't like, studios trying to make what might look like an American movie. It's much better if it can come out of their culture, albeit told in a recognized Western cinematic structure.
Right. Got it. Excellent. And so coming to the last question now, which is, what do you see as the future of animation in the international context as well as in the Indian context? If you can share a little bit about that, what you feel is the future of animation by itself.
Well, I think potentially.
This is purely from a context that you have a lot of young people who are anxious and who do not know whether animation can be a career for them, whether they can invest their time and effort and money into animation courses, learning animation in a more professional way. So purely from that perspective.
Well, first of all, look into your heart and see if it's really something you want to do. Right? It's not because it's a labor of love, but it's it's an art form, and you have a gift, and it is it's lovely to have a career creating something, being creative. I've never known a time anywhere where anyone said the industry is better than it used to be. People always talk about the past as when there was so-called full employment, or the world was wonderful. That's never the fact. We always look back with a what we'd say tinted glasses.
Nostalgia.
Yeah. So there's no work. You won't get a job. No one's hired. That's always the case, and no doubt about it. The world is a roller coaster. Things go up and down. So don't worry about that. Worry about whether you want to do it and whether you're any good at it. And there are things to look to yourself. But if you have a passion for it and you're good at it, I mean, the great, Kareem makes movies and employs people, but probably had the same humble beginnings as you did. Grew into it. I know your dad, Kareem, you were born into it, actually, weren't you?
I was born into it, but I started my own studio.
I was born into the theater, but these filmmakers, these people have this passion. One day you will employ people, and you will be a good employee. You will be a good leader, and you'll recognize. So in coming into the industry, you're not necessarily what you might be the provider for others, but it's about personal aspiration. What do you want? But don't worry about the naysayers. There's always naysayers to anything. Tell me an industry at the moment that looks better.
Right.
A scientist trying to find a cure for these pandemics. That's good. But you want to be a chef at the moment in a restaurant. It's tough at the moment. So go put yourself in another industry.
Right.
Well, actually, let's take cooking. I want to open my own restaurant. Well,
absolutely.
You could open a restaurant. We have a little. I live in a very old village, 1,000 years old, and outside of London, and it's very good. And next door to me, I have a very old pub. A classic English pub and restaurant. It's been there for hundreds of years. It's closed. So find something you'd rather be. See if there's another industry out there that's any better at the moment than animation. I don't think you'll find one. And what a legacy, for me to show you this morning the films I got to work on, what a honor that is. And I'm not the creator. I'm part of a team that had a job bringing part of those movies to life. And what an exciting, way to spend your life, and so don't turn away from it. Don't regret it. Don't regret. You can try and fail, but don't not try and then spend the rest of your life regretting that you didn't do it. That's the real danger for you as an individual, is regret. Because if moving art is in your heart, then you must do it. You must do it, because you will regret it later. But whether you can be successful, where there's employment, who knows, who cares? Because you're not interested in everybody, you're interested in you getting a job, not everyone getting a job. And of course you want opportunity and everything else. So don't worry about everyone else, worry about you. And don't use the challenges around the world as an excuse for you not doing what your heart is telling you to do.
I think the message from you is very, very clear, that if you have the passion, you can succeed in this industry. Why? You can succeed in any other industry as well. And if you have the passion, you can create a big team, you can tell your own stories, you can build your own studio. And that's such an important message. I think one of the things that I would like to add to Max's message is that a lot of people are a little impatient, especially among the younger generation. Remember one thing, that Disney said it takes 16 years for a person to become an animator. Okay, are you willing to give in even 8 years of your life? Every single morning, get up, iterate, learn new things, learn your craft, get to know yourself better, get to know your craft better. I think that's very important. With that, Max, I would like to really thank you for being there. I wish I could continue, but we are already extended by about 25 minutes to our session. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful chat. I'm really, really grateful for you having to be with us. And I think 7,000 people right here, right now with us. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. I'm gonna hope that one day one of you that are listening and the big part of this today that we'll be able to meet in person, and you'll walk up to me and wait. I was on the seminar that day. I mean, the thought that there's 7,000 of you part of this is amazing honor for me, and just shows what an extraordinary enthusiasm there is in India, in your community for animation. And because I know that it's not because if you had other people from our industry, you'd equally be there to listen to them. So I thank you for listening to me today. And Kareet, to you, my friend, I thank you for making this such a joy.
I really loved every single bit of it. Of course, I've heard those stories from you a little bit before, but it was it was a lot more in depth in terms of your, it was such a long, hearty chat, and it's wonderful to have you with us. And I think that the kind of messages and the kind of lessons that the students will take from here are going to be absolutely indelible. And thank you so much, Max, for being with us. And we hope to have a few more sessions with you as and when possible. I'm sure the COVID is coming as a beautiful boon for us, for individuals for us to be able to catch hold of individuals like you, to be captive with us for almost 2 hours. So thank you so much, Max.
Great. Let's do it again. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye now. I'm going to leave meeting. Bye now.
Yes. Bye. So thank you so much for everybody for coming, and I'll hand it over to Rajesh. Rajesh will tell us more about the session and how he enjoyed it. Rajesh?
Wow, that was a real great experience. And I'm sure both the students and the professionals attending got a lot to learn from this giant of the industry. Thank you very much, Dr. Howard. In your favorite sports terminology, you knocked it out of the park for maximum Dhoni style. I'm so happy for all the student attendees that you took so much time out from your busy schedule to share your journey and the highlights of your career in this world of fantasy and entertainment. Thank you once again. Many thanks, Kirit, for facilitating this webinar and painstakingly making sure it would be a great event. Thank you, my friend. I would also like to thank our event associates, Client Media, Media Entertainment, Skill Council, Entertainment Skill Council, the Animation Society of India, and the Animation Express. Thanks again, once again, all of you and our team, back-end team of Chetal and Vishal. Thank you very much. And to our audience, I hope you all enjoyed and learned from this insight. And if you've liked it, please do subscribe and click on the bell icon. Please stay home, stay safe. Till we meet again, all the best.